Alright, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Same Circle Wrestling. We are back again. It seems like it's been quite a bit of time. I feel like it's been almost 2 weeks.
Well, I was on vacation, so I was out.
Yeah, that was pretty much the main reason for it. But we'll talk about Money in the Bank because that has happened since the last show. I believe the last show was after Elimination Chamber, so we'll go from there and we'll kind of skim up to this point in time. So I guess we can start with Sheamus winning the Money in the Bank contract.
On my end, seeing Sheamus win was probably the safest way they could have booked that match, because if you let Kane win, then all of a sudden you have Kane against Seth Rollins, and that's kind of a problem. You let Roman Reigns win, you're going to have the same backlash that they had with the Royal Rumble. So I think like the next big competitor you can kind of key on and say, oh yeah, that guy can hold the briefcase is Sheamus. And I mean, in the last 2 weeks or week and a half since he's held it, I mean, it's fit in with his character. He's kind of like the badass brawler, but he also has something up his sleeve.
Yeah, I think if you're going for safe, I guess Sheamus is sort of the way to go. I mean, you had a lot of guys in this that you knew weren't going to be the guys that come out with it. I mean, Ziggler's already had the contract. You got Neville that's, on his way up, but not quite at the point where they should give him that. But I mean, like, story-wise, for me, it was kind of questionable in a way because you don't really have Sheamus involved in that storyline quite yet. But I mean, now you can throw him into that storyline, but really, do the fans want him to be in that storyline really is the big question.
Yeah, that's the issue, is realistically, I mean, the only one you could really buy as that top immediate title contender was Roman Reigns. Sheamus a close second to that. And Roman Reigns was almost so obvious that he served as a red herring, realistically. So, I mean, it's been pretty clear ever since Sheamus came back that they were grooming him for a main event push, and you just weren't sure if they were going to follow through with it because it's WWE, but, I mean, it wasn't totally out of the blue. There is that question of whether the fans will buy into Sheamus as champion, but even with it as strong as they've been booking him, I'm not sure he's that credible anymore, but it really isn't too far-fetched to see Sheamus with that briefcase. It was about the only thing he had left to win in the company.
But, I mean, you get to the point where, like, that Sheamus, there's a good chance that Sheamus isn't going to carry the WWE World Heavyweight Championship down the line. I mean, even if he does, it's a short run, so it almost was like a waste in my mind. But, I mean, really, like I said, there weren't a lot of other options.
Well, one of the biggest issues that they ran into with booking this match is, look how they booked it last year when they gave it to Seth Rollins. When they gave it to Seth, they basically had, an entire, 10-month build on this. They had him carry that briefcase throughout the summer season, through SummerSlam, through the Winter Series, and leading up to WrestleMania. Yeah, that's gold booking, but you can't book it twice in a row and then come out and say, oh yeah, we're keeping it fresh and interesting. With Sheamus, he's not going to hold it until WrestleMania, so it leads some kind of fluidity to the storyline of, oh gosh, what is going to happen next? And I think that's kind of refreshing.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think the rest of Money in the Bank's card, really, like, you don't have to talk about a whole lot of it. I think John Cena and Kevin Owens definitely needs to be talked about a little bit, considering there is another upcoming rubber match. And then we also had Primetime Players taking the tag team titles, so that was interesting. But back to Cena and Owens, I think, realistically, it's kind of the right move to have Cena win this because you want to drag it out into a third match. But, at the same time, it was questionable to me that they even did a second match with Cena because you got Owens who wins clean coming off of NXT. I think really what they're going to try and move it into is moving Kevin Owens into the United States Championship spot and having Owens eventually drop the belt or be stripped of the belt. in some way or form.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at that match, the only thing that really scares me is the way that John Cena and Kevin Owens are booked relatively evenly so far. I mean, you have Owens having the monster heel, and we've seen John Cena face the monster heel half a dozen times in as many years. Is that, if Kevin Owens comes in on top beating John Cena, what is next for him? Like, what can you do to top that? That's probably one of the strongest entrances that we've seen in a singles competitor in years. So, I mean, like, what happens for Kevin Owens after that? I mean, he's 31 years old. He doesn't have a relatively long shelf life. He's come out and said he's been doing this longer than John Cena. You got to imagine his body might not hold up for a long-term WWE success. So are they trying to push him to the top to give him a chance?
I think at this point, John Cena's at a spot where he isn't going to be around. I mean, he's going to be around, but how much longer is he going to be around? And I think Cena's at the point in his career where he can take losses and put guys over, and it's not going to affect his legacy. So I feel like he needs to do that with Kevin Owens, and I feel like they're going to do that either way. But I do think that Cena needs to not only put Kevin Owens over, but there's a lot of guys on the roster that he can help out.
And that's where the issue comes in. When you have the U.S. title on someone whose power level is as high as John Cena's, is beating John Cena clean in a feud is arguably a bigger rub than winning the championship even. And so if you do go over Cena for the U.S. title, you've pretty much established yourself as being above that title already. So I'm not really sure what you do with Owens and the title, because it would make him look too weak to lose the belt, but having him win the belt is arguably holding him back already.
Exactly. You got to have that William Regal thing come up and sort of... I mean, he has to be stripped of it. It's really the only way to make him look strong.
Yeah, and like, I'll speak to John Cena being the face. I wore my Bo Dallas Believe shirt at one of the days that I was at Firefly Music Festival. And I had, quite a few people, like probably 20, 30 people who saw it and went, oh yeah, believe, that's all you got to do with the thumbs. And then a few people were just like, well, what the hell does that mean? And I would mention, no, it's a WWE thing. And they'd just go, oh yeah, WWE, Stone Cold, John Cena. It's like, it doesn't matter who the championship is being held by, whether it's Seth Rollins or Randy Orton or anybody like that. Like, the first name that comes up in recognition is going to be John Cena, and it's going to be that way for a couple of years from now. So, I mean, a clean win over somebody like John Cena, as Bill said, that's an amazing move as your entrance to WWE.
Yeah, and you can do that with anybody. It's not just, once Kevin Owens goes over, which, I mean, he really already is, John Cena's at a point where he can put a lot of guys over, and he doesn't need these wins. So anyway, we'll talk about Rollins and Ambrose, which, like, I thought that was, it was an interesting match, but the way it ended was definitely questionable. I mean, you could have just had Rollins take it clean, but essentially what happened was they both climbed to the top of the ladder and detached the belt. They both come down at the same time, and it's sort of like an NFL tie goes to the receiver sort of rule, where Rollins ended up with the belt on the ground, so they gave it to Rollins. And I thought that the way it was choreographed was kind of stupid, and I thought really if they were going to just keep it with Rollins, just do it clean.
Well, I think one of the things, as you said, the way it was choreographed was stupid. The way that the two guys went up there and sold it was quite impeccable. Like, they pulled it off really well for something that we all saw as quite obvious. So, I mean, yeah, it's pretty stupid, but they had to find a way to build up Ambrose. I mean, not ruin his push by having him lose a feud outright with Seth Rollins. They were careful last year not to let Ambrose win that feud or lose that feud cleanly. So they kind of gave it a bit of, he didn't get destroyed by Seth Rollins. He kind of lost it by fate. And I think that helps them both moving forwards. And I mean, yeah, as you said, it's written stupidly, but they pulled it off quite well.
I think it comes down to really the WWE testing the fan reaction of Dean Ambrose and, what Dean Ambrose could bring as a WWE champion.
And I think, I don't know, I'm down with the idea of having the match end that closely to keep Ambrose looking strong, but just the way you have it end that close and have that as the wrap-up to the feud, I'm not sure if I feel that quite as much. But, I mean, you don't really... I don't know if that gets chalked up to just how WWE almost programs the audience to expect feuds to continue or not based on the outcome, but I can see why they did it, but it just, something about it felt off, really.
I mean, other than that, like I said, really, Money in the Bank was relatively uneventful.
It was a free pay-per-view 2 weeks after a free pay-per-view. That's pretty much how it was.
So, do we want to talk about Lucha Underground? I know you didn't watch this, but Prince Puma and Johnny Mundo with a 60-minute Iron Man match. They did this one match for the entire night on the whole show. And it was a really good match. A lot of really cool spots because you had pretty much them climbing all over the temple. And Mundo does a pretty cool spot off of the... Well, they both actually went off the stage, right?
Yeah.
Both off of the stage through like 4 tables. You had, I think, who was it? Somebody got hit with a guitar. I don't know, it was a really good match. And it was very, it was creative in the way that they did a lot of their spots. And eventually, anyway, Puma retains the championship. And I think really they're trying to build up to Ultima Lucha now. Really, that's what this week was as well. Wasn't as eventful as last week, but I thought that, when you only have one match, you really got to deliver, and I think they did a good job with it.
Yeah, it was quite by the book for Iron Man match booking. You have Johnny going pretty far ahead in the count, and then you have the comeback.
Last second.
It was quite well executed, and what I noticed is they did a really good job of basically killing time in that match. They have Johnny going up to the bandstand, having the band play a song. I mean, there wasn't really much idle time at all, even though they still tried to pad it out a little bit. But they did a good job of working around that. The action itself was quite good, really. Outside of the big spots, it was still really solid. A good back and forth. They did a good job of basically having Puma get the living hell beat out of him. He played the face and peril role very well. And there's not a lot they could have done better with it, really.
Yeah, and they really didn't make Johnny Mundo look too weak, because towards the end of the match they had El Patron come out and attack Mundo, sort of for revenge. And it gave Prince Puma the window of opportunity to sort of, come back, and he does win in the last, 5 seconds or something like that. So yeah, overall, very good match, especially, like I said, when you only have one match on the card, you gotta make it look good, and it definitely was. It was a Lucha Underground, like we said, it's great every week, and they top themselves every week, so just keep watching. Especially with Ultima Lucha coming up.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm looking forward to, is watching all these storylines get wrapped up. Because, I mean, we can watch WWE, we can watch Ring of Honor and stuff like that, and we know that when they hit their milestone pay-per-views, and they call it, wrapping up all the storylines, quote-unquote, they're immediately setting the seeds for what happens the next week, because there's really no off time when it comes to those promotions. So when you see Lucha Underground, you know it's in a seasonal format, and you know that when you hit Ultima Lucha that we're not going to have another episode until next year, that all of a sudden, it kind of starts to set into your mind where this is a bit more episodic, like a television show, and this should be like our season finale. We're going to see some amazing stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we're definitely looking forward to that, and I don't know how many weeks it is. I forgot when they said exactly Ultima Lucha is. I believe it's just going to air on El Rey, isn't it?
I'm going to Google it real quick while you guys are talking.
Because I believe so.
Yeah, I don't think it's a pay-per-view. But, yeah, I mean, I don't see why they would do
God. I accidentally opened up the results.
Oh.
It's gonna air on August 5th, 2015, and I'm not gonna scroll down. It doesn't say when it's gonna air, but I can tell you a lot of stuff in my hands across the screen.
It's gotta be on El Rey. I can't imagine that they would just make it a pay-per-view out of nowhere.
I had a heart attack and almost peed my pants.
Oh, I can imagine. Lucha Underground is the one show I do try to avoid spoilers on nowadays.
That was scary. Like, I saw the words one battle royal, and I went, nope, not happening, not today, kids. So there's a battle royal, whatever that is.
Yeah, at least we know there's battle royal.
And at least that doesn't spoil a lot, so...
It could be something for the medallion, that one of the other medallions.
No, I think that's something else. I know that's something else, because the guys from We Watch Wrestling were there. Shit. It just says airing a 2-hour event called Ultima Lucha.
I don't know. Do we want to talk NXT from last week, or do we want to skip that? I mean, really, there wasn't a lot going on that. It was Owens and Samoa Joe, the no contest. Really, I think other than that, there wasn't much.
I think NXT's basically been relegated to squash match central for the past month or so.
Yeah.
You can tell they're reeling with all the injuries down there. And now that they don't have Dusty Rhodes to book things down there, it's going to be even more day-to-day.
Yeah, really, NXT comes down to the main event every time. So we had last week, we had Samoa Joe and Kevin Owens, which was a no contest, just ended up brawling. And then this week we had Finn Balor and Rhino, which Finn Balor wins. So really, like I said, it really just, NXT just comes down to that main event at this point in time. I guess really they're waiting for the Japan show. I mean, I don't know when the next TakeOver is, but I know it's a quarterly show, so I don't know exactly how long it's been since TakeOver, but that's still down the road relatively far.
Yeah, and that's one of the things watching NXT. Like, you can tell they're injured, like, hardcore, because you're seeing guys like Jason Jordan, and Ty Dillinger get airtime. And, I mean, their top tag team at the moment is Zack Ryder and Mojo Rawley. So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on down there. It shows their frantic nature of having to find a way to make up for who they're losing.
And it's not all that bad because, it is a developmental area. You got to have guys that, even if you do have guys in squash matches, at least they're in action and they're getting experience in the ring. It's not just a wrestling promotion. It's a developmental, promotion in itself.
Okay, Ultima Lucha is August 5th on the El Rey Network at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I can't really imagine that they,
go to a pay-per-view format for something already taped.
Right. Especially with something that's episodic like that on, I'm sure people watch it. Even outside of wrestling fans probably watch it just for the fuck of it,
Yeah, I'm still recovering from accidentally opening the spoilers.
Yeah, it's times like that you're glad that NXT is available on demand on the network, because I can't imagine anyone that actually watches Lucha Underground who would rather watch NXT at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the major issues. I mean, Seth and I were talking about it last night. Like, we were talking about maybe watching the TNA thing that they were putting on TV, but he and I were both watching NXT, asking each other what was happening on TNA. So that just shows you we're watching NXT an hour after it aired, just because we still see that as the far superior product to TNA. But we know the Lucha Underground's going to win our time every single time it's on TV.
Yeah, and we were watching it even when we knew that we were going to see Jeff Jarrett on TNA. So that would, we knew that was going to be a relatively big announcement. We should talk about that as well. But we were watching NXT anyway, just because it's NXT.
Yeah, I mean, NXT shows a lot of promise. And, I mean, Ring of Honor will show you the guys who are going to be in WWE in 5 to 6 years. But, that will only matter 5 from 6 years from now. So, I mean, I still imagine we're going to see Roderick Strong someday in WWE, but it's not today and it's not tomorrow, and we got to pay attention to what's going to most immediately affect us.
Yep. So I guess we can also talk Lucha Underground from this week, which I'm sure we probably all watched this.
I gotta say, Mil Muertes is a badass.
Yeah, I like Mil Muertes a lot.
His career is amazing. He set Vampiro on fire.
So yeah, Mil Muertes and Drago. It was relatively, it was a good match, but you got Mil Muertes, who's like essentially the Brock Lesnar of Lucha Underground. And, even a guy like Drago, who like the fans are relatively heavily behind, you got a guy like Mil Muertes who still, beats the shit out of him and really dominated most of the match. And it's leading into, it was for a number 1 contendership, and it leads into the Prince Puma match.
And really, I'm just behind Mil Muertes so I can be behind Katrina.
Well, yeah.
Of course. Specifically behind Katrina.
Hey, I'll take what I can get.
I mean, we can also I want to talk about the Fatal 4-Way match, too, with Aerostar, Marty the Moth Martinez, the Mac, and Cage. This was for I believe it's the 3rd Aztec medallion.
And we still have 4 more to get rid of.
Yep. So Aerostar takes this, and it's interesting because they're really giving it to a lot of the high-flying luchadors versus a guy like Cage. And they mentioned that in the match, too, and it was a good point because down the line you're going to expect somebody like Cage to take one eventually.
Yeah, especially if what it's going to culminate into is going to be all of the guys with a medallion going against one another. You got to imagine you put Cage in that match if you don't have anything else planned for him.
Yeah, I have to say, for whatever reason, I was actually expecting Marty the Moth to take this match. I mean, you had the pre-existing tension between Cage and the Mac. And then you have Aerostar, who's a high flyer, so he could easily take himself out of the match. I was expecting him to grab one cheap, but it was almost too obvious that he was just there to eat the pin, but that's exactly what ended up happening, so in a way it's almost a reverse of a swerve.
Yeah, it came down to him eating the pin, but it was after, I think it was the Mac, it was like a belly-to-belly to Cage on the apron. Yeah. So there were some cool spots in that match, too, and Aerostar always has awesome matches, so I don't know, I think it's the right thing to do. So who has them now? Jack Evans, Aerostar, and who's the first one?
Phoenix.
Yeah, Phoenix, that's right.
A lot of high flyers in this match already, so I'm kind of interested to see what that turns into.
Yep. And then, other than that, we just saw Superfly and Sexy Star. Superfly wins. We also saw Pentagon and Vampiro sort of face off, which I think leads to Vampiro and Pentagon down the line at Ultima Lucha, which I think would be interesting because, it's essentially your WrestleMania, so why not let him, come back for that one match?
It'll be interesting because I don't know what kind of ring shape Vampiro is in, so that could be pretty exciting.
Yeah, like you said, it'll be an exercise in Lucha Underground's booking strength because Vampiro's been out of action for quite a while, unless I'm mistaken, and he was never really the greatest worker to begin with, even when he was an active wrestler. So, I mean, Pentagon Jr. is plenty good. I'm sure he'll be able to carry the match to some degree, but I do expect them to book something to cover up Vampiro's weaknesses in the ring.
Yeah. Well, we moved through the last couple weeks pretty quick. I haven't watched WWE very much this week or even really last week, but I definitely want to talk Brock Lesnar and what's to come at Battleground. I believe, I don't know exactly what else has been announced for Battleground as far as matches goes, besides Lesnar, Rollins.
So far for Battleground, we have Roman Reigns and Bray Wyatt, Seth Rollins against Brock Lesnar, Ryback versus The Big Show versus The Miz, The primetime players against the New Day, John Cena versus Kevin Owens. And then also rumored we have Nikki Bella against Paige, as well as Dean Ambrose against Kane are the rumored matches.
See, and Dean Ambrose and Kane is pretty much you know who's going to take that. I think you probably have Kevin Owens beating John Cena. We discussed that earlier. Bray Wyatt and Roman Reigns is interesting. Really, who comes out on top of this?
I think when you put the two together, we're still like 3 weeks out from this kind of match, but I still think that it's going to be a dirty finish, and that finish is just going to lead us into SummerSlam, and that's going to be like one of their marquee undercard matches.
Yeah. It's hard right now because you got two guys that do need a push, and you got them feuding together, so one of these guys is going to get the shit onto the stick, and I feel like it's probably going to be Bray Wyatt again, just because he's taken so many of them. It's not going to impact him anymore.
Right. I actually think Bray Wyatt's going to win at least this match, so that way people can start to see that Bray Wyatt has some kind of force, and we need to see the monster that he needs to be. He needs to be the Mil Muertes of WWE. He needs to be the all-out, no-holds-barred, I got nothing against me because I already have the dead on my side type of character. So I think that's what we need to see. We need to see the reemergence of Bray Wyatt.
I think we do need somebody to be the Mil Muertes of WWE, but I think you got Brock Lesnar, who's above that, but you also have Kevin Owens that's really being groomed to fill that spot. I think really a Kevin Owens and Bray Wyatt feud would be pretty interesting eventually down the line.
I do think, Bray Wyatt definitely needs the win more than Roman Reigns. I think Roman can bounce back from a loss in a feud a little better than Bray can. But at the same time, you have to wonder, is WWE really going to let two of their biggest faces that appeal to the younger fans in John Cena and Roman Reigns both lose on the same card? And so, if it comes down to that, I definitely think I'd take Kevin Owens with a win over Bray Wyatt at that point. Optimally, I'd have them both win, but I'm not so sure they'll go with it. Honestly, it's really, it feels like being set up for disappointment here. But not that that's anything out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Well, the issue at hand is Kevin Owens and John Cena will be wrapping up, in theory, they'll be wrapping up their feud. And at the same token, Roman Reigns and Bray Wyatt will be pretty much just starting their feud. So I think we can pretty much transfer John Cena and Kevin Owens over to Roman Reigns and Bray Wyatt. And that way you can have Bray Wyatt, or Kevin Owens hold the title, but then have a really engaging feud between two top stars, because we know Bray Wyatt has a lot of fans and Roman Reigns has a lot of fans. I think that can be your marquee undercard feud to kind of take the place of John Cena, Kevin Owens in the meantime.
What's really astounding to me is that Bray Wyatt really does have a big fan base, and they're failing to capitalize on it, as it is right now. And it's interesting because in some venues he gets a massive pop, or in some venues you don't really even hear a crowd reaction because of the way the storyline's going, and he just doesn't matter at certain points. So it's really interesting to me that they haven't given him a push, considering how long he's been there, how many feuds he's been in with credible talent. And I think we've said it many times before that Bray Wyatt does deserve to be up there on the A level of the card pretty much all the time, regularly.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that moving forward. We're still 3 weeks out, so a lot of that will become clear in our next podcast. So let's just hope for the future.
Yeah. Well, I think we essentially pretty much blasted through everything that we needed to talk about. Not really the most eventful 2 weeks in the wrestling world. But I watched a little bit of Ring of Honor the other, I think it was a week ago. I didn't watch any of it this week because I couldn't get Destination America to come in, which is fucked up because for some reason Sci-Fi and USA will run fine on my Xbox, but when I use Destination America, it's like one of the one channels that doesn't come in regularly. Every once in a while, it just won't show up. So it's like if I'm gonna want to watch Impact, it's an iffy thing, and it's the same with Ring of Honor. I'd like to watch Ring of Honor because they do have quality matches. I mean, the production isn't there, but the match quality definitely is.
Yeah, and I mean, we also, while we were off, we had the Ring of Honor pay-per-view Best in the World, which Bill said he watched. I mean, there were a couple pretty good matches in there, especially when you look at, you got Bullet Club against The Kingdom, Jay Lethal against Jay Briscoe, Mark Briscoe against Donovan Dijak. I mean, it was a pretty stacked card. I mean, that would have been available as a pay-per-view and not on, Destination America, but I definitely think that pay-per-view would make up for, the lack in television production you see on their weekly show.
Yeah. Really, I just wanted to see Jay versus Jay, and not to be confused with J and J.
Rest in pieces, Jamie Noble.
But Jay Briscoe and Jay Lethal was really the only match I was looking forward to on that. I'll actually have to find it and go back and watch it, but Jay Lethal comes out on top. It was actually a belt merger match, but for I think it was the TV title and heavyweight title.
The World Championship.
So yeah, I'm gonna go back and watch that. I mean, I haven't watched enough of Ring of Honor to, give it a verdict. But I think, from what I did watch, I thought the matches were definitely good.
The title match was particularly crucial because Jay Briscoe had not been pinned in over 2 years. And Jay Lethal was realistically the last credible challenger for the belt. So that almost had to go down the way it did. In particular, the other match I enjoyed was Dalton Castle versus Silas Young.
Mm-hmm.
Dalton Castle, I think, has one of the stronger characters in the entire company. Just a very flamboyant character that even 10, 15 years ago would have been played up for heel heat, but the crowd eats it up. They love Dalton Castle. And he's got his boys, which I think is a very nice touch for the gimmick. I believe it was on his debut when he's basically reclining on one of his boys like a chair. I mean, it's a nice touch. It sells the gimmick. Dalton Castle, if I remember right, he's actually a relatively local wrestler. He's from Albany, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's actually a radio host over there. And he works in Chikara, too.
I think really what makes Ring of Honor at this point is the fans. I mean, you have such a loyal fan base in Ring of Honor, and a lot of them are very WWE, very anti-WWE. So, it's interesting because the fan base is very into it in Ring of Honor, and I think if I had to rank the fan bases, I mean, really, you got to put Ring of Honor up there at number one, because it reminds me of the old ECW crowds. In a sense, you got a lot of people throwing shit, and that's what's cool. I like them being allowed to do that. But I think you got a really cool fan base with Ring of Honor, and it brings another dimension to the show.
Like Ring of Honor, I equate, like you said, to the ECW audience is like those are the only guys who are willing to bleed along with the superstars in the ring, and that's a really rare dynamic, especially when you look at WWE. And the people in the front row are kids. I mean, those kids are really into it, but I don't think they get the whole, aspect of the show. And in Ring of Honor, I mean, there's very few frills based on what you see. Like, the farthest they get into, in-show pyrotechnics are, the streamers that they throw around. And you know what? It helps build the characters because everything that happens in the ring oversells the stuff that they lack on other aspects of the show.
Yeah. I don't know, anything else you guys want to talk about? I mean, I think, like I said, I think we covered most of it, as far as what mattered.
All I gotta say is watch out for Team Bella's when it comes to Survivor Series. I think that's gonna be pivotal going down the road.
I think, I like I said earlier in the chat, I think at least that it's odd that Alicia Fox is being thrown into that mix with the Bellas.
Yeah, Alicia Fox at this point, she seems to turn between heel and face even more often than a Mark Henry or a Big Show does. That's saying a lot.
Yeah, but I think that'll become clear as we move forward in the summer, because they like to have a Divas Survivor Series match, and I think this is probably the first time in the last couple of years that they can build something positive, especially if it ends up being against a Team Paige and she can get some recruits from NXT, such as, a Charlotte and a Sasha Banks, and this can be like the ushering in of the NXT women's division into the WWE Divas division to help lend some much needed credibility to them that they've been trying to get in the last year.
Yeah, I think as soon as those girls come up into the main roster, you instantly have a better Divas division. Like, instantly the second they're up there. And I think Becky Lynch is going to end up taking the NXT title and being the top of NXT for a little while. I don't know what they're doing with Bayley. I don't know if they're going to give her any kind of push or what. She seems to be at the same level that she's been at for like the past year or more. But I think really who comes up first is probably Charlotte. Because they did the same thing with Neville, where he was dominant in NXT for a while, and then just sort of floated around until they were ready to bring him up to the main roster. I think that's what they're doing with Charlotte.
Yeah, and it's still way too early to tell, so, that's just me being a lofty observationist.
I think Bayley, you have to think, I'd say they're running a slow burn story with her journey to the championship, much the same way they did with Sami Zayn. You got Becky Lynch, who, arguably until her showing against Sasha Banks at the last TakeOver, Bayley might have been ahead of her in line for that title, but Becky just performed so well and she got so over with that crowd that I think she may have actually jumped Bayley in line for that title. Which, Bayley can afford that because, as I said, the slow burn, that really plays into the story they're trying to tell with her title push. Becky, she really is just ready for it. Bayley's ready for it, but it's basically the way it's got to play out. I do think Becky gets it first.
Yeah, I think one thing that's also interesting with that division is you got Emma, who went back down to NXT to develop, and she really hasn't done anything besides just be the cheerleader for Dana Brooke.
Yeah, and I think that'll all become more evident once we pull up Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch. No, not Becky Lynch, Charlotte. I think that'll free up a lot of room because that's still a very clouded division, and there's a very clear hierarchy. And there's a lot of people vying for who's going to take over those spots once the top two take off.
So, like we said, I think that the NXT division, as far as women goes, is so much better than the main roster. And once they come up, that main roster gets just a massive boost.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so are we ready to wrap?
Sounds good to me.
We're going to start Season 3 relatively soon, probably after SummerSlam. We're thinking of doing a SummerSlam special, similar to what we did with WrestleMania. Otherwise, it'll just be another episode, maybe a Season 2 finale or whatever. We're also looking into maybe a new theme song or something along those lines. So with Season 3 coming, it'll be pretty awesome, I think. And we would like to, maybe we'll try and change our format as well in some ways. But as of now, this week we really didn't have a lot to talk about. I thought it was a relatively boring week, pretty much on every show. And like we said, NXT is just kind of, floating right now. WWE's doing its usual grind to every pay-per-view. Ring of Honor's been, just coming up, really, if you're getting it on cable. And Impact is pretty much always at the same level. So really, this week was relatively boring. So we will see you next week. Hopefully we can, get some more people on the show. We've been trying to get people back, but nobody seems to have the willingness to want to show up. But I mean, we can utilize Skype as much as we want, and it'd be really nice to get people, even if they're on Skype, to just to have a little bit more input. So with that, we'll see you next time. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and we'll keep you up to date with results. We haven't been tweeting as much as we used to. We do need to step that up a little bit, but
we do it a lot more for the live shows than we do for other stuff, but we will be stepping it back up.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, it's been relatively boring. We haven't really had the motivation to want to even tweet anything about it. But yeah, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and we'll see you next time.
Same.
Same.